In late June, 70 researchers and farmers took part in a WA Livestock Research Council by invitation study tour to the UWA research farm in West Pingelly. On site, they were treated to a broad range of presentations that provided an insight into the extent of projects underway and the degree of collaboration between WA's livestock research community. The Annual Legume Breeding Australia joint venture with DLF Seeds is delivering some exciting opportunities under the guidance of our next presenter, Phil Nichols from UWA.
Okay, welcome everybody. We've seen a lot of animal stuff this morning, and that's the main product. But what we're going to look at here is talk about some of the stuff that can feed them. First of all, I'd like to introduce Brad Wintle. He's my offsider, and he's the one that really makes things happen. So if we get a chance, I'll get Brad to talk a little bit about the trial itself. So where you're standing, you're not actually in clover there. That's the buffer. There's a around the trial. The trial's just behind us, and you can see how wide the plots are, and they go down 5 metres. I'll talk a bit more about the trial first. We wouldn't normally have a field day this time of year with a clover trial that's only 3 weeks old, because let's face it, there's not a real lot to see. Come back springtime, it'll be much more interesting. But what it does, it gives us an opportunity to talk about our ALBA program. And for those who may not know, ALBA is short for Annual Legume Breeding Australia. The program's been running since 2018. Brad and I were originally with DPIRD, and we moved across to UWA at the start of 2019, but it had already been set up. And it's a joint venture between UWA and DLF Seeds. DLF Seeds were formerly known as PGG Wrightson Seeds in Australia. And the aim is really to breed new and innovative annual pasture legumes for farming systems across southern Australia. So the idea is that we do the breeding and selection, and DLF Seeds do the seed increase of varieties that we might recommend for registration, and then the marketing side of it. So the key species is a range of species. Subclover, the 3 different subspecies of subclover. We've also working on balancer clover, Persian clover, purple clover, arrowleaf clover. We hope to start a bit of work on crimson clover, and there's the opportunity to work with other species where there's a market fit as well. What we have here, I'll just say that most of the early generation work, so this is the crossing and early selection, we do at the University Field Station in Shenton Park. We do have some other stations that we work at, but then we have some of our most promising material we then put on research stations and farms across southern Australia, where they're tested under farming conditions. So here we have a group of early flowering varieties. So we've got 29 breeding lines, and we've got 7 cultivars, commercial varieties that are out there. And the trial has got 4 replications. It's randomised, and there's 4 replications. And this will be a 3-year trial. So the first year here is really, we'll get some information, particularly in spring, but it's setting it up. We'll get our most useful information in the second and third years. We'll see how well they persist as well as produce. So the main material we've got here, it's really aimed at roughly the 325 through to 500 millimetre rainfall zone. So for those who know anything about clover varieties, we're talking about sort of the Nungarran, Dalkeith through to Urana sort of maturity. So this is a reasonably safe environment for those that sort of rainfall zone. But we would much rather have an environment where we're confident we're going to get a decent trial than sticking right on the edge of the wet belt where we might get a drought year. So that's why we've got a trial here. We've got 3 other sister trials, one down at Katanning, and then there's 2 interstate, one in northern Victoria and one in central New South Wales. And yeah, so Brad, do you want to just talk a little bit about what we've done to the trial, how it was sown and what treatments were done with it, just briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So basically, for any good establishment in a pasture trial, you need to do a very good knockdown. So we hit it with spray seed. I spiked it with Elevate, and also put in firepower just to take control of some of the emerging ryegrasses. So I guess you're wondering how it came about. So we've got a cone seeder. It's pulled by a little Kubota tractor, 1500 watts. And so it's quite essential to have this sort of small gear to do these sort of trials. So we can cart the gear on the back of a trailer so it's accessible. So the cone seeder, basically what we've done here, that's a seeding run there. So the carriage, it's a twin disc opener, so it creates 6 furrows with the colty trashers at the front. And we do 1 pass up and 1 pass back. The plot area is 10 square metres, 5 metres long by 2. So the carriage is 1.25. So we go up and down. So what we're creating here is a mini sward in which we can, come spring, we can start conducting our measurements on. So it's got also the fertiliser is at 180 kilos per hectare of super potash 3 to 2. So that basically, this machine I think has done a really good job. We've got a pretty good strike here. If you have a bit of a walk around, you'll see the emerging seedlings. And the depth, we had a bit of a play around. We got the depth at about 10 mil. So the machine's got, if you work with it, it's got quite a bit of flexibility and you can utilise it to get the sort of results you want.
Thanks, Brad. So just finishing off here, and then you might just have a quick look around so this was sown on June the 1st, and there was a bit of moisture when we sowed into it, but then there was a dry spell for 7 days, and then there's been buckets of rain since. But we came through 10 days ago, and I was a little bit disappointed with the strike, but I think they were the ones that just germinated on the moisture in the soil, and since then the ones that germinated after the big dump of rain have now come up. So I'm quite happy with the strike. It was sown at a pretty decent rate of about 7.5 kilos a hectare. So the idea with this this is not how farmers would do clover. You would plant much earlier in the year, obviously, but we need to have a site that's pretty clear of clover, and if you look around, there's not really a lot of clover in between where it hasn't been sown, which is what we want. We don't want too much contamination of other things, and of course being weed free, and that only stays weed free for a certain while. You can see a green tinge. So one of the good things about coming here today is we can have a look and see what sprays we need to get out and what weeds we need to control. We'll measure biomass production in spring and then winter and spring next year. Over the next couple of years, we'll measure regeneration seedling densities. We'll monitor for reaction to any pests and diseases. Some of the things that we've already screened for to get them to this stage is low phytoestrogens, or particularly fulminontin content. That's clearly a thing. We'll be hearing more about that from Kevin a bit later, but that's one of the key selection criteria. We can't release a variety that's got high levels of fulminontin. So that's one of the key things we screen for. Flowering time, the appropriate flowering time, clearly. We don't want late flowering varieties in this sort of environment. Hard seedness, we've screened for hard seedness, so they can persist through a year in crop, and also helps with false breaks and regeneration after a poor year, basically. So so we talk about resilience there, and also we'll be screening shortly in the glasshouse for reticate earth mite tolerance. They should have some, but we need to check that. So they're the sort of things we'll be screening. And just a bit about the program. These are early flowering varieties. We've already been doing some work on late flowering and varieties, and we've got 2 that are being seed increased at the moment for higher rainfall areas, and also we've got a Uninicum type, which is the waterlogging subspecies type, where we've also got a variety under seed increase for that. So we've got some early releases in the program. So I think that's probably where I need to wrap up, given the time constraints. If people want to have a quick look around, you can see the drill runs and you can see the clover popping up. If you want to have a quick look at the trial, feel free to walk around.
Is there one that's a bit more advanced than the others? What's that? But also, what if you
No, that's either wild radish or rogue canola.
and what if you do get disease? Does everything just get treated, or how do you handle red leggeds or anything else?
No, everything gets treated the same. So if we have to put a spray on, the whole trial gets sprayed. Yep. There's not much clover in this paddock, which is one of the reasons we chose it. But we always inoculate. So we actually used a Alaska because it's easy to do. We've got lots of little packets. So we sowed at an equivalent rate of Alaska granules to the seeding rate.
Yep. pH of the site?
Good question. We haven't done a proper chemical analysis yet, which we will be doing.
And is the amount of nitrogen that these legumes are going to produce, are you having a look at that as far as for a cropping perspective, that one might produce more nitrogen, and also as far as coping with herbicide carryover from the year before if it's going into crop?
No, we won't be looking at amount of nitrogen in this trial. I guess our assumption, if it's growing happily, it's fixing nitrogen. I mean, and there may be differences between them, but that's not something we'll be able to test in this environment, in this trial.
Just a quick one on the general ALBA program. Is there plans that they'll measure any anti-methanogenic properties on selections or breeding programs? I realise not for this trial, but in general.
Well, potentially. We're looking at new innovative traits into the future, and that's certainly something we would be interested in looking at. Hasn't been a primary criterion to now. But if we get a short list of things, and we've got the opportunity to screen them, we will.
Might be a bit of a naive question, but clovers, do they all produce the same amount of energy, or different varieties produce a different amount of energy? And how does that sort of compare to ryegrass and grazing crops in terms of energy yield?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not an animal nutritionist. Again, we make the assumption that they're all going to produce similar amounts of energy and have similar nutritive value. You'll get differences between species, but we're looking within the species here. There could be, but you're probably looking at fairly subtle differences. Clearly, there's differences in maturity, flowering time. Something that can stay greener longer, where others are, winding up. They'll be better for the animals. But no, we're not looking at that in any particular detail. No, I need to have a talk to Tim about a fence. We have got plans. It's just a matter how we make that happen, basically. And once we have a fence, the rest of the paddock can be managed. But yeah, it'll certainly be grazed. Particularly subclover, it's designed for grazing. And Yes. Look, it's the sort of thing you put sheep in, and we will notice that. It's the sort of thing you put sheep in, and some will be grazed more than others. That's the sort of thing we can note.
Yeah, Phil, I reckon one of the key criteria for a pasture is how fast it can get to a point where it'll sustain stock, which is a fundamental conflict with sowing it in the 1st of June. How do you resolve that?
Oh, well, okay. As I said before, if you're a farmer, you'd have sown like Tim did on the first rains with the oats he put in, or something much earlier, because you're after feed. We've got slightly different objectives in the first instance as scientists. We don't want background clover. We want to get rid of that and the weeds and then go into a clean area. So there is a compromise in the first year, but it's a 3-year trial, and we'll get our most useful information in the second and third years from that, when they'll be germinating with the opening rains.